Okay, we start off with automatic. Okay, start off with paying respects to the Buddha. Yeah, we give 3 bows. First bow, second bow, third bow. Okay, then we do the opening chant, the homage. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. 3 refuges. Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Dutiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Buddhaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Dhammaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. Tatiyampi Sanghaṃ saraṇaṃ gacchāmi. And the 5 precepts. First one. Pāṇāti pātā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Adinādāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Kāmesu micchācārā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Musāvādā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Surameraya majjapamādāthāna veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyāmi. Okay, sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So, good evening once again, and we are probably going to finish off this particular topic, the Sutta, Saccavibhanga Sutta, the analysis of the truths. So, for the past few weeks, we've covered actually most of the Noble Eightfold Path, the 4 Noble Truths, and most of the Noble Eightfold Path. And probably tonight we'll finish off the last 3, right effort, mindfulness, concentration. In fact, we stopped at right effort. So basically, just a quick recap. So basically, it's Venerable Sariputta trying to explain the 4 Noble Truths and the Noble Eightfold Path to the rest of the monks. So we covered all these things. You can look at the previous live stream for more info. So I'll just skip right to the right, mindfulness. Okay. So it says here, what is right mindfulness? There is a case where a monk remains focused on the body, in and of itself, ardent, alert, and mindful, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. Then second one, he remains focused on feelings in and of themselves, and the same repetition. Ardent, alert, mindful, putting aside greed, distress with reference to the world. And the third one, the mind. And the fourth one, mental qualities. So these are the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So the fourth one, these mental qualities, some may translate as phenomena, some may translate as yeah, I think phenomena. Last one is Dhammanusati, phenomenon. Okay, so the first one, mindfulness of the body, or in fact mindfulness in general. This term here, right, mindfulness, is very specific. Yeah, it's just for these 4 things, right? A person can be mindful of, how do you call it? Mindful of the weather, mindful of the news in your news channel, the stock market. So all these are, we call this mundane kind of mindfulness. Yeah, mundane kind of mindfulness. So earlier on, we were discussing about this awareness and clear comprehension. So mindfulness of the body, there are 6 kinds. There are 6 so-called subcategories under the category of mindfulness of the body. So the first one is the breath, then the 4 postures, standing, sitting, walking, lying down. And the third one is awareness and clear comprehension. Basically all your activities. So you want to read the newspaper, you want to check the stock market, check the weather. So all this is under this third one, awareness and clear comprehension, doing your circular so-called mundane activities, playing with the children, doing house chores. So when doing this, a person, let's say if they're wholly focused on this awareness and clear comprehension only, they are very aware, they are very alert, they are very careful, very precise, they remember everything they do, every single step, they do not forget who owe them money. So they very careful, right? But that doesn't equate to detachment itself. Yeah, if a person just having this kind of awareness alone. All right, so I'll just finish off the other 3. And the fourth one, mindfulness of the 32 parts of the body. Then the fifth one, these 4 elements, earth, fire, wind, water elements. And the last one, the 6th one, is the charnel ground meditation, the stages of bodily decomposition. So these are the 6 kinds of mindfulness of the body. So whatever kind of meditation we are doing, be it the breath or awareness, clear comprehension, or the 4 elements, or the impurities of the body, alone itself, there's no spiritual value. Right? So even a doctor can, or a surgeon can know the parts of the body very well. They know the human biology and anatomy. But that itself doesn't mean they are detached, doesn't mean they are free from craving. Right? So the key word here, putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. So you need to contemplate in a way that you can reduce greed and reduce your suffering. So this is very in line with the 4 Noble Truths. Right? You need to overcome the cause of suffering and eventually overcome suffering. So to do that, normally we use this Satipatthana Sutta, or the Maha Satipatthana Sutta, talking about the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So that scripture, that discourse, after mentioning each aspect of this mindfulness of the body, there will be this, they will tell you, be aware of the origination and passing away of the breath, origination and passing away of the 32 parts of the body, origination and passing away of your activities, awareness and clear comprehension, so on and so forth. So there must be this spiritual component, this spiritual reflection. A person must think of this right thought to reduce greed and clinging. If a person do not reflect on impermanence or do not reflect on their so-called meditation object, anything that leads to the wholesome thought, then it defeats the purpose. Yeah, any biologist, any doctor can know the parts of the body very well. Any person doing exercise can do the breath very well. So that itself is a circular, mundane skill. So we need the reflection of impermanence to add the spiritual value, right? To achieve this putting aside greed and distress with reference to the world. All right. Then same with feelings. Feelings we classify as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral feelings. So these are the three kinds of feelings. Yeah? And the same stock formula, a person needs to be aware of the origination or passing away. If you cannot observe both minimum, or you try your best, either you observe arising or you observe passing. And if you really cannot observe anything, just be patient, stay there. So that's the last resort. And sometimes people will just say straight away, stay with that awareness. Stay with your awareness. Like, how to stay with the awareness, right? So you need to be mindful of impermanence. The last resort is stay with the awareness. If you cannot detect any changes, so that will be the last resort. Until you detect something again, then keep reflecting on impermanence. But in our routine, we play safe. We have an added mantra we call the right label, the right thought. So you sub-vocalize, we think of impermanence. You can use any label. You can use origination, passing away, arising, passing, impermanence, change, anicca, whatever associated with impermanence. Yeah? So this will kind of give you a reminder. Okay, and the same thing for the mind, the third aspect. The mind, we'll be talking about different states of mind. First, dealing with the emotions, whether you have greed, hatred, delusion, or don't have greed, hatred, delusion. And also, it also covers the cognitive functions of the mind, whether the mind is restricted, is it narrowed down on this area, is it not restricted, is it expanded, are you covering a wide area or not covering a wide area, and so on and so forth. And it talks about the different levels of consciousness, I would say. Yeah, different levels, the spectrum of quality of consciousness. Talks about whether the mind is concentrated, not concentrated, the mind liberated or not liberated, so on and so forth. So these are the mindfulness of these states of mind. And all this also the same thing. We need the reflection of impermanence. In the meditation routine, let's say if we happen to achieve a certain stillness, calmness, or sense of peace, it won't last long. You need to keep reflecting on impermanence, and we just treat it as a byproduct. So we are not deliberately pushing these states of mind away. We are actually focusing on generating the right thought, so that these things, we treat them as just a passing kind of scenery, just a byproduct. All right, and the last one, this mindfulness of these mental qualities. So this one talks about the 5 hindrances. Your sloth and torpor, restlessness, mind, greed, hatred, and doubt. Yeah, these 5 hindrances, and it talks about the 5 clinging aggregates. Normally we cover in the meditation routine also, reflect on the arising, passing of 5 clinging aggregates, which we also covered earlier in the lesson on the first noble truth of suffering. It talks about the 5 clinging aggregates as suffering. So basically this mental qualities is arranged in a way that it tells you the first 5 hindrances are the symptoms of suffering. And these obvious symptoms, they are suffering. And it talks about the 5 clinging aggregates as the so-called the mastermind behind it. And after the 5 clinging aggregates, talks about operation, how it operates through the 6 sense bases. When you see, hear, smell, think, taste, and touch. So when you do all these activities, you require the 5 clinging aggregates. And once you understand this Dhamma, and if you reflect on the impermanent nature of this, one will trigger the 7 factors of awakening, 7 factors of enlightenment. So the 7 factors of enlightenment, first is mindfulness, second is investigation of Dhamma, third one is effort, and once you have these 3, it will trigger this thing called rapture or joy, Dhamma joy. So sometimes in the meditation, if you're able to keep repeating impermanence and you're able to let go, suddenly you feel like there's a surge of joy, this pleasant sensation, it suddenly appears by itself, you're not deliberately creating them, so it comes from detachment. And this joy will subside, it will have tranquility, and after tranquility it will have the 6th factor, which is samadhi or concentration. So if you develop this insight concentration, it is not the jhana concentration. So it is the wisdom related concentration. And the last one is this equanimity. So the mind will achieve a kind of balance. So these are the 7 factors of awakening, and they will fluctuate depending on how much clinging you have. So if a person, let's say they practice halfway, they have certain joy, certain joy from detachment, and if they're not mindful, they start to daydream again, they start to cling on something, and everything will be back to square one. You need to restart from scratch. So that's how the 7 factors of enlightenment sort of work in sequence. And after 7 factors of awakening, then the last mental quality would be the 4 noble truths. So if a person truly, let's say, experience these 7 factors of awakening, that itself is the path to cessation. So it covers the last 2 noble truths. The 5 hindrances, the 5 aggregates, these cover the first 2 noble truths. So if a person investigate and understand this Dhamma, then they will experience the 4 noble truths. So it becomes no longer theory, no longer theory. It's meant to be experiential, 4 noble truths. And again, this is just a glimpse of the 4 noble truths. Only an Arahant can fully understand the 4 noble truths, because an enlightened being will have to truly overcome greed and anger, so that is complete, or they experience the full spectrum of this cessation. Then they truly, fully experience the extent of overcoming the suffering. If we just experience a bit of detachment, okay, that's just partial experience, not the full version. Alright, so I covered the this right mindfulness, and the last one we are trying to finish this off today is this right concentration. Right concentration. And I'm just going to read through. Before I move on, right concentration, anyone has any questions with the mindfulness? No, Okay, then just interestingly, from the share screen point of view, I cannot see everyone's screen, so I have to just move the Q&A to after the presentation. Okay, so right concentration. There is the case where a monk, or maybe any practitioner, quite withdrawn from sensuality. So I underline, quite withdrawn from sensuality. Some people say, enter jhana means totally cannot hear, totally cannot feel anything, totally cannot sense anything else. So this is not true. Quite withdrawn, so that's the key word. Withdrawn from unskillful mental qualities. Right? So the whole idea is you need to withdraw from unskillful mental qualities. So this is the main one. That means withdraw from reacting. So anything you see, hear, smell, think, taste, and touch, if you react with greed and anger, that is unskillful qualities. If we keep generating right thought, then you're overcoming these unskillful qualities. So you're generating skillful qualities. Okay, and they enter and remain in the first jhana. Right, so that's the first level of concentration. So what are the symptoms? Right, rapture and pleasure born from this withdrawal. Right, so these are the so-called withdrawal symptoms, rapture and pleasure. So positive withdrawal symptoms, accompanied by directed thought and evaluation. So the ones in bolded words, these are the factors of these jhanas. So again, it is not compulsory to see light la or feel any other thing. So the minimum requirement or the main requirement are these four things: rapture, pleasure, directed thought, and evaluation. Anything else is bonus. Alright? And the next one, if a person able to let go of the first one, or some people directly they jump to the second one, like in our meditation routine. If let's say a person, let's say they practice compassion straight away, they don't do loving kindness, they practice may all beings be free from suffering, and if they do it correctly, they withdraw from these unskillful qualities. Right, they reduce these directed thoughts and evaluation. So what happens in the second level of concentration is that these two factors will be gone. Right, these directed thoughts and evaluation will naturally be gone, disappear. You cannot tell it to be not there. You don't have to purposely think of it to be not there. Right, if a person enter the second one, it will naturally have these two factors called rapture and pleasure. Rapture and pleasure. Right. So again, there are many different interpretations. Some people say directed thoughts and evaluation means you have to think. You need to think. Right. If a person enters the first level concentration, they need to think. They need to investigate the Dhamma. So that to them, that is the definition of directed thought and evaluation. But personally, my take on this directed thought and evaluation, these are background cluttering thought processes. They are the cluttering kind of sensations, cluttering kind of thoughts that will block off these emotions, rapture and pleasure. So the first level of concentration, the rapture and pleasure, will not be as distinct, not as strong as the second level. The second level will have this rapture and pleasure appear more distinct than the first one because it doesn't have this directed thought and evaluation. So it has nothing to do with the investigation, the thinking part, because every level of concentration need thinking, you need right thought. Right? So you can cross-reference it with the other kind of jhana suttas. Every level of jhana need to reflect on impermanence, and there's a whole list of contemplations. So thinking is required. Okay, then I move on to the third one. And if a person enters the third level with the fading of rapture, he remains equanimous, mindful and alert, and senses pleasure. Right, with the body, he enters and remains in the third jhana, of which the noble ones declare, equanimous and mindful, he has a pleasant abiding. So this is the third level of concentration. So the main difference is there is no more joy and just happiness. So down here the translation is pleasure. So I move back to the previous slide. So the previous slide, it has rapture and pleasure. So the other common translation is joy and happiness. Right. So down here in the third one, it will have this pleasure and no more this rapture. So it only has happiness, no more joy. Right. So it has this equanimous mind, equanimity also. But the main difference is this emotion, pleasure and no more rapture. So if a person wants to distinguish what's the difference between this pleasure and rapture, they need to transit between the second and the third level of concentration. Likewise, if a person want to experience or want to know what is this directed thought and evaluation, they need to transit between the first and second level of concentration. So by experiencing that state of mind between the first and second, then they can know through the process of elimination, they know that, oh, this particular feeling or this particular sensation is gone or is there. And that would be this directed thought and evaluation. So same thing for the second and third level of concentration. If a person were to experience the third and the second, they know the difference between the two kinds of pleasant emotions, then they'll know, okay, the missing ingredient is this rapture, this joy. And finally, the last one will be this fourth level, with the abandoning of pleasure and pain. As with the earlier disappearance of elation and distress, he enters and remains in the fourth jhana, purity of equanimity and mindfulness, neither pleasure nor pain. This is called right concentration. Right. So eventually, the fourth level of concentration will have one factor called equanimity. Yeah, I've forgotten to bold the words here, but yeah, there's only one factor called equanimity. So there's no more pleasure. So only in the fourth level, then it will be a bit more obvious, no more joy or happiness, no more rapture, no more pleasure. So it's a neutral, neither pleasure nor pain. So it's a neutral kind of feeling, but refreshing, very alert, because it gives you this recharge your mindfulness. So it feels different from the normal still baseline emotion. It is different from sleeping. If you're tired, you go to rest. Yeah, I know it's neutral, but there's no wakefulness. There's no mindfulness to it. Whereas in the fourth level, it's a boost of this mindfulness. Yeah, it gives a boost to this equanimity and mindfulness. All right. So it's a temporary recharge to your mindfulness. So once you have this equanimous mind, then you can do more investigation, even if you're outside of this jhana. So if the mind is in the sensual kind of sphere, that means you're back to the six senses. You're not in the concentrative state. The equanimity will sort of linger. It will linger for a while. It's just like charging a battery. The battery will last for a while. So we make use of that battery to investigate. Yeah, the six senses, how it moves around, the five aggregates, how is it impermanent. So that's the function of this equanimity and mindfulness. Yeah, because if a person doesn't have enough equanimity as an anchor point, the mind will cling to the strongest stimuli. Yeah, if you cling to the next strongest stimuli, which is our sensual pleasant and unpleasant feelings. And once we have that, then the mind will easily create dramas and stories. Oh, nice feeling, I want some more, right? Unpleasant feeling, then you have aversion, and it kind of skews this investigation. So with this kind of equanimity, it makes the investigation a bit more objective. So you make your mind more cool, quite grounded, and yeah, makes you more rational basically. Okay, so I think it's closing, going to finish. Yeah, so at the end of it, right, so this is the conclusion part. This is called the noble truth of the path of practice leading to the cessation of stress. Friends, at Varanasi, in the game refuge at Satipatthana, the Tathagata, the worthy one, the rightly self-awakened one, set in motion the unexcelled wheel of Dhamma that cannot be stopped by Brahman or contemplative, deity, Mara or Brahma, or anyone at all in the cosmos. In other words, the declaration, teaching, description, setting forth, revelation, explanation, and making plain of these four noble truths. That is what Venerable Sariputta said, gratified. The monks delighted in Venerable Sariputta's words. So that's the end of the presentation. So I open the ground to Q&A, questions and answers. Anyone on the floor wish to ask questions can unmute and ask questions, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
Maybe 2 questions.
Okay.
I just want to clarify to make sure I did not misunderstood the word sensuality here and the pleasure from the jhana. We view it differently. Am I right? Or the sensuality, to be away from that sensuality, and then to have that pleasure and rapture from the jhana. This sensation or pleasure, if I could use that word, is not considered sensuality in that sense.
Yeah, that's right. So that is the pleasure from the jhanas is not from the 6 senses. It's not from the ordinary, the pleasures we have. It's not like you can achieve it from shopping, from watching your favorite shows, or that kind of stuff. So that is the similar account when the Buddha, before he achieved enlightenment, when he gave up these ascetic practices, he was experimenting. When he was meditating, he was recalling the past when he was still a small boy. He was like meditating alone. He escaped from the plowing festival under the tree, and he managed as a small boy to experience the first jhana, the first level of concentration, which has this joy and happiness. And he was thinking, when he was doing his so-called exploring the middle path, he was thinking, how come he has this happiness, this joy and happiness. And he was so afraid to enter this first jhana because to him, when he was practicing asceticism, he's supposed to give up sensuality. And then he was thinking, contemplating, is that meditative state sensuality or not? Then he was thinking, no, he was withdrawn from the senses. So he was thinking that sensuality is okay, it's alright. In fact, he classifies wholesome kind of sensuality. Yeah, so he made use of this and he explored further, entered the different levels of concentration, and eventually got enlightened.
I just heard you mentioned about the mind, if it's not in the face of equanimity, if it's not doesn't use it as an anchor, the mind would tend to move towards sensual pleasure. I have personally heard of 2 experiences. Someone during meditation, they kind of experienced very unpleasant sensation, like maybe pain, severe pain and things like that, body discomfort. After a while, they kind of, if I could use the word, enter into a kind of in a space where it's very comfortable and calm. I wonder whether or not this is kind of the different direction with the mind. If it's too adverse, then it would escape into that space. Is that the possible reason why people in this kind of situation, they would perhaps enter this, I don't know whether or not I would call it pleasure and equanimity in that sense?
It requires this right reflection, the right conditions to enter these concentrative states. And of course, jhanas alone, without right reflection, can also be done. A person can achieve jhanas without right view, without right reflection. So a lot can be done let's say, purely by force, by stealing the formation. So some practitioners, including some monastics or regardless of tradition, sometimes you hear them do fasting, which the Buddha eventually discouraged, but they use that route to calm the formations. So by using these kind of external means, without using the Eightfold Path, without relying on the right thought, they enter this kind of stillness, stealing this fabrication. Right? So they achieve concentration through that. So the Buddha mentioned that if, let's say, a practitioner doesn't have this right view or right thought, if, let's say, they achieve the jhanas from there, and if they pass away, they will be reborn. They can be reborn in the Brahma worlds associated to whichever level of jhanas they're in. And if they end up in that so-called heavenly worlds and they do not create enough merit, and if, let's say, they use up the merit there, they use up all the karma, the good karma in the heavenly realm, and the only thing remaining will be the bad karmas. And they will eventually pass away and be reborn in the lower realms. So that's the downside of just having just the jhanas alone. So the jhanas need to accompany with this right reflection. So I give more simple to understand kind of metaphor or analogy. So doing the jhanas is like a stepping stone. It's like charging your handphone, right? It's like you need a battery, you need to charge. So if a person does jhanas only and doesn't do any kind of reflection, doesn't do any investigation, you just charge up but never use the phone. You never turn it on, you never call anybody, you never use any app, you never do any work. Right? So basically that's what you do. So that's the problem. And if let's say a person does charge the phone and uses the phone, then it's like using it for insights, for reflection. So you get something done. Right? So that's the purpose of doing both, the jhanas and the vipassana. Okay, any other questions? Anyone? Nobody?
Hello, Bante.
Yes.
Yeah.
Hi.
Question regarding the right mindfulness.
Okay.
I read from someone also called sati.
Yeah, correct.
Then, but I tend to there's 4 body, feeling, quality of mind, and mental state. It's quite difficult to differentiate the quality of mind and mental state. Sometimes you hard to observe what is what. And then how do you observe? Only during meditation or during our daily life we can also observe?
Okay, if let's say you cannot multitask, you start off with the body. So it's like the Buddha start off with the body first because that's the most obvious kind of evidence. The mind is like invisible, you cannot see the mind. So you start off with something more obvious, mindfulness, the body, the breath, the sensations, the elements. So all these are obvious sensational kind of phenomenon. Yeah? And once you have that kind of grounding, then it's easier to work your way up. And also it doesn't matter or doesn't necessary if a person knows all the different states of mind, able to categorize all the states of mind or not. If a person can be just mindful of the impermanence of the body, maybe the breath for example, if they just focus on just one aspect of this mindfulness and they're always mindful of impermanence, if they have detachment, then everything will be there. The detachment, the factors of awakening will be there. Okay.
How do we observe the origination and passing away? What is that actually?
That's basically, for now you just take it as arising and passing. how it appear, how it arise, and how it disappear.
Okay.
Mm.
Thank you.
Okay, no problem. Anyone else? No questions? Okay, if not, we go for a 5-minute break. Okay, welcome back. Let's see who else has returned. Okay, so while waiting for the rest to turn on your screens, those who came back, anyone wants to add anything?
Hi, Bante.
Yep.
Yeah, Bante, can I check with you? Why is it when during meditation, the ascending part, you cannot feel your body for the bottom part, and then when you descend, then only you start to feel the your leg and everything. Am I on the right track?
Yeah, that's got to do with how much a person withdraw from the senses. So all these we call I will call this cognitive skill. Cognitive skill. So it's case by case basis. Each individual have different skill, and this cognitive skill may or may not depend on concentration. For example, a person busy with work, or I don't know, maybe some kids or teens busy playing with video games. They're so absorbed, someone called them, cannot hear. They're totally oblivious to the time, the surroundings. So that is not a concentrated state. Yeah, the mind is full of desire. They playing and whatever not, right? So if a person busy with work, the same thing, they work until OT without knowing any kind of struggle. Now they are too engrossed with it. So that doesn't necessarily count as jhanic concentration. Yeah, so I would call this more like a cognitive kind of skill to cut off from everything. Yeah, so same thing. So if we bring that to jhanic meditation, some people can cut off a lot of things. Some people cut off some things. But the main thing is, if you experience that state of mind, the state of peace, and those jhanic factors, then that's on the right track.
Okay, thank you, Bante.
Okay, no problem. Okay, anyone else? Any issues? Okay, looks like majority have returned, so we can start. So we can mute the microphones, make sure we are seated upright, the rest of the body relaxed. Okay, so the first phase of the meditation is the impurities of the body meditation, learning to let go of the body. So we're going to visualize all the hairs of the head, hairs of the body. So thinking of the hairs alone, any hairstylist can do it. So we need to add the spiritual dimension. We're going to wish them well and happy. Apply the right thought, the Noble Eightfold Path. So every time you think of a new patch of hair, then you need to reapply the label again, wish it well and happy. So that is part of right effort. Yeah, the repetition, right effort. And the thinking of the hairs, part of the body, that's part of right mindfulness. So you slowly start to spin the wheel. It cannot spin very fast immediately, doesn't matter. You start off slow, you pick up momentum. Keep on wishing the hairs well and happy. And then you can observe your state of mind. Is it calmer or getting more agitated? So the more you generate right thought, it should have a calming effect of the mind. And you can observe how far can the mind settle down. So most probably there's like a limit to how much it can settle down. So if you find that the rate of settling is like negligible, then we call this the steady mind, stability point, the baseline emotion. And that is the minimum requirement to have an effective kind of insight reflection. And we can now move on to reflecting on impermanence. Part of right mindfulness, you need to observe impermanence. So all these hairs go through birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So you think of them growing and falling, many, many cycles. And as we keep looping this process, we can observe the arising and passing of the 5 aggregates. And so when we generate the image of the hairs, the moment when we think of the thought, what kind of form, what kind of elements, what kind of sensations appear to the thinking process. Does the sensation travel to the head, travel to the heart, travel where? So that is the first aggregate form, defined as the 4 elements, earth, fire, wind, water elements. And the second aggregate, which is called feeling. So when we think of the image of the hairs, what kind of feelings do we have? When we think of young hair, do we have pleasant, unpleasant, neutral feelings? And when we think of an old hair, what kind of feelings? And when we think of the hair falling off, what kind of feelings? And we have the third aggregate called perception. So perception is basically the kind of memories we use in the past to try to cognize, try to make sense of the images we are producing. So we make use of the image we've seen before in the past to try to generate the image. Now what kind of color, what kind of shape is the hair, what's the length, what kind of labels we use. We call it a young hair, old hair, white hair, so on. All this memory, this perception, third aggregate. And the fourth aggregate is called mental formation. Every time we generate a new image, that is a new mental formation. And the last aggregate is called consciousness. Basically, that's your attention, your awareness. When we sort of think of the image, we are using the mind door consciousness. And if you're hearing my sound, then you're using your ear consciousness. So when we keep thinking of the process, hairs growing and falling, what happens to that consciousness? Does it stay there in between two images? Does it move around? Does it change in intensity? or what happens. So these are the 5 aggregates. Again, if you cannot multitask, think of just one. When you have one, all 5 are there, they're operating there all the time, regardless of you paying attention to it or not. And the main thing is to observe whether the greed and distress, is it reducing or increasing. If the more you meditate, the more stressful you become, the more anxiety, then something is wrong with the meditation. Something is wrong with the technique. Okay, then we can ask ourselves, are these hairs truly self? Can we tell the hairs not to go through birth and death? And the next part of the body, we are going to think of the nails, fingernails and toenails. May they be well and happy. And all these nails are subject to birth, aging, sickness and passing away. So we think of them growing and falling, many cycles. And as we keep looping this process, we can observe the arising and passing of the 5 aggregates. And we can ask ourselves, are these nails truly self? Can we tell the nails not to go through this birth and death? Next we can think of the teeth. all the teeth inside the mouth, may they be well and happy. And all these teeth are subject to birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So we can think of the teeth growing and falling, many cycles. Even though the teeth fall off the most twice, we can just keep repeating. And while we keep looping this process, we can observe the arising and passing of the 5 aggregates. Then we can ask ourselves, are these teeth truly self? Can we tell the teeth not to go through birth and death? And next we can think of the skin, the entire skin. We are going to wish all the skin well and happy. And all the skin are subject to birth, aging, sickness, and passing away. So we think of the skin growing and falling, many cycles. And as we keep looping this process, we can observe the arising and passing of the 5 aggregates. Next we can observe this sense of self. Is it increasing or decreasing? Okay, then we can ask ourselves, are this skin truly self? Can we tell the skin not to go through birth and death? So the next part of the meditation we are doing is the 4 sublime states. And we use the grounding and evidence from mindfulness of the body, mindfulness of the 4 elements. So this one doesn't require any kind of imagination, no visualization, purely feeling of sensations. So all these are real-time evidence. So the 4 elements are the earth, fire, wind, water elements. Earth represents any hard or soft sensations. Fire represents hot and cold. Wind represents any kind of movement, fast or slow movements. And water represents any moist or dry sensations. So the whole idea is to detect these sensations. If you cannot categorize, know which element they're in, doesn't matter, don't have to crack your brain. Whatever you detect, you just wish it well and happy. And the 4 elements are just a general guide. And these sensations also come with feelings. Sometimes they're painful feeling, unpleasant feeling. Sometimes they're nice feelings. Whatever sensations, also make peace with them. So you wish them well and happy. So we are not rejecting, we are not fighting with those sensations, we are not clinging, we are not holding to them. So no greed, no hatred. So we walk the middle path, avoid these both extremes. Every time keep generating right thought, wish it well and happy. So we need 2 things. First the evidence, the sensations, and we need to label them, right thought. So right mindfulness, right thought. And when we keep repeating, that's right effort. So the same phenomena should occur, whatever kind of meditation object we're using. When we have the thoughts of non-anger, like loving kindness, it should calm down the mind to a certain degree, to this baseline level, this baseline emotion. So we take note of this state of mind. We currently call this the restricted form of loving kindness. So when we talk about mindfulness or states of mind, this is a restricted mind. we're still thinking within the confines of the body. And once you take a note of this emotion, remember this emotion important because when we talk about concentrative states, we use the emotions as indicator, the jhana factors. So it's only you yourself can experience. Okay, so most probably this restricted state of mind is very bland, this emotion is very bland. And once we've taken note of this, we are going to now wish all beings in all directions well and happy. So that we are now expanding the mind, expanded mind. So this part of mindfulness are states of mind also, expanded mind. So we are not pushing the mind outward, right? We just make a gentle wish and we let the mind extend naturally by itself. However far you wish to extend doesn't matter. And for this particular routine, there's no need to visualize, or the best is try not to visualize. What we are doing now is using a non-discriminative approach. All beings are made of these 4 elements, these 5 aggregates. So whatever sensation we may detect in that area of attention, inside the body or outside the body, doesn't matter. As long as you detect any kind of movement, any kind of sensation, then we are going to wish all beings well and happy. A new sensation appear, may all beings be well and happy. New sensation appear, may all beings be well and happy. So this is thought of good, universal goodwill, boundless loving kindness. So it's a noble thought, not like wishing for world peace. We are not targeting any small group. We are not wishing our friends, not wishing our relatives. This is all beings. The more right thought you generate, more right effort, right mindfulness, if the conditions are right, it will trigger this right concentration. So again, if let's say you experience an increment of this joy and happiness, deeper sense of peace compared to the baseline emotion from the restricted kind of loving kindness, and that will indicate the first level of concentration. And regardless of what you experience, keep on wishing all beings well and happy, treat everything else as bonus, as byproduct. Okay, and now we're going to add some insight, and we're going to reflect on impermanence, all these sensations, all these elements, observe how they arise and pass away. So the same thing, sensations, evidence, and the right labeling. Impermanence, impermanence, or rising, passing, whichever label you're comfortable with. Okay, if let's say the steps you're doing are correct so far, the joy and happiness start to disappear. One may experience this equanimity of the fourth level of concentration. No more joy, no more happiness, neutral but refreshing kind of experience. And the same thing, regardless of what you experience, keep on reflecting on impermanence, treat everything else as byproduct, as passing phenomenon. Okay, then we can move on to the second sublime state, which is compassion. So for compassion, we wish all beings, may they be free from suffering. And similarly, we are using the non-discriminative approach. All beings, regardless whether they are rich or poor, healthy or sick, as long as they cling on to the 5 aggregates, they will result in this sense of suffering and produce suffering. So whenever we detect any sensation that is also part of the 5 aggregates, then we wish all beings free from suffering. New sensation appear, may all beings be free from suffering. So again, a gentle reminder not to visualize, not to go into the dramatization of, oh, how to help this person, how to help that person. Once we start to worry, which becomes the hindrance, part of the 5 hindrances is worry. And once we start to worry, then we create a lot of dramas, then it becomes a mini samsara. Then we experience the ups and downs in that story, the dramas, many episodes, many series. So we try not to go into that direction. We come back to the foundation, the grounding, the elements. So importantly, when we wish all beings free from suffering, we ourselves try not to get sucked into the 5 aggregates and suffer. New sensation appear, may all beings be free from suffering. Okay, if let's say the conditions are correct, you have all the right thought, right effort, and everything, it will trigger this right concentration again. So this time round, this concentration normally will enter the 2nd level, denoted by the emotion of joy and happiness, and doesn't have the additional cluttering of this initial sustained thinking of the 1st level. So the joy and happiness is supposed to appear more clearer than the 1st level. And the same thing, regardless of what you experience, keep on wishing all beings free from suffering. Treat everything else as byproduct. Okay, now we add some wisdom, add some insight, and we're going to reflect how to transcend this suffering. That is to not cling on the 5 aggregates, and we shake off this clinging with impermanence. So the same thing, observe the sensations, evidence, and label it with impermanence. Okay, due to time constraint, we're going to slowly conclude. Before we end, same gentle reminder, in all our activities, as long as we are mindful of these sublime states, or mindful of impermanence, then this is the noblest living. And with that, we can gently open our eyes, formally end the session, informally still can generate right thought. Alright, any issues from anyone? Okay, if there's no issues, then we proceed on with the dedication chanting. Anumodana. Akasata ca bhumata devanaga mahidika punyang tang anumoditva chirang rakantu loka sasanang etavata ca amhehi sampadang punya sampadang Sabbe deva, sabbe buddha, sabbe satta anumodantu, sabba sampati siddhya. Dedication of merits to departed. Idang me nyatinang hotu, sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu, sukhita hontu nyatayo. Idang me nyatinang hotu, sukhita hontu nyatayo. And aspiration, imina punya kamena mame bala samagamo, satang samagamo hotu, yavani bana patiya. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So we end off with paying respects to the Buddha by giving 3 bows. So the first bow, second bow, third bow. Okay, so that's it, and there's no announcement. So next week we'll start with a new topic, I think suggested by Roy from previously, on gratitude. So we'll see you next week, and good night.